In case you are wondering who the new guy in the band is, actually, Dr. Professor President Andrew Rehfeld of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, who's an awfully talented human in many ways. Dr. Rehfeld is this year's Bernice and Seymour Nordenberg Memorial Scholar in Residence. We are grateful and we welcome you all to our annual program, the Bernice and Seymour Nordenberg Memorial Scholar in Residence program here at NSCI. Mark and Linda Nordenberg, who you'll all wave to, who are on the live stream from Florida, established this incredible program for our congregation in honor of Bernice and Seymour of blessed memory, of their love of learning and commitment to community. Along with this being an occasion to remember both Bernice and Seymour, it has also become a blessing to remember Sylvia Wolfson, whose memory also abides as a blessing. And for those of us who remember Bernice and Seymour and remember all the years Seymour got up with great pride and great aplomb and introduced our scholars because he was so proud of bringing our leading scholars in the Reform movement, hold his face and his excitement in your mind's eye. It is for me a great joy to welcome Dr. Rehfeld, who's an old friend. In fact, I knew him in the days when he was playing a lot of guitar. I don't think you get a lot of guitar in these days, because before he was a professor and a Federation CEO and the president of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, he was a longtime song leader and nifty advisor. Dr. Rehfeld is the 10th president of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. So I'm going to try something here. HUCJIR, as we call it, some of us call it the college or college institute, is the school, the many schools, four campuses, multiple schools, that trains our rabbis, cantors, educators, Jewish communal service workers, and numerous other programs. So if you are a graduate / ordinee of HUCJIR or the relative of one, could you just raise your hand so Dr. Rehfeld can see how many are in the room? You have graduates, you have family of graduates, a bunch of proud parents and in-laws. Any siblings? I don't know. Pretty amazing. So Dr. Rehfeld is the 10th president of HUCJIR, a position he has held since 2019. He's bridged the academic and Jewish professional worlds in amazing ways. He was a tenured faculty member in political science at Washington University in St. Louis for 18 years. And subsequent to that, he was the president and CEO of the Jewish Federation of St. Louis. He inherited a job at a difficult time in the Hebrew Union College's history after the tragic death of his predecessor, and he has led with grace, with strength, with wisdom, and incredible fortitude and character. We are grateful, Andrew, that you are here with us this evening, both sharing music and sharing scholarship and friendship with us. Welcome. Just move a microphone.
Always better to unmute things. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And what a joy it is to be here. And I want to begin by thanking the Nordenberg family who's online. And events like this bring ideas and deepen congregational learning. And your resources made that happen. I wanted to thank Rabbi Green for identifying all of our future prospects for support of the HUCJIR. In all seriousness, to see the network of people who have been touched and affected and shaped by the professors that came well before I was affiliated with this institution. And I just also want to say how profound it is for me, just like we have teachers that taught so many of you and your family members, to have two of my teachers in this room tonight, Rabbi Mark Belgrad and Ellen Weisskopf-Blank, who's on the other side, and the two of them together were my song leading teachers at Kutz Camp in Warwick, New York in 1982. They were both 12 at the time. It is incredible to be here, Rabbi Geffen. Thank you for hosting this and for the leadership. And Cantor Goldstein, thank you for welcoming me to this band. And Jacob Leisman, Rabbi Jacob Leisman, I've known you as Jacob for, you and I, we were together in HUC learning, you were learning how to be a rabbi, I was learning how to be a president. I was gonna, thank you all for being here. What I want to say tonight is it's a difficult topic because we're in a very difficult time. We're in what is either day 248 or 49, depending on when you start or end the counting of a hostage situation that is about to 340, forgive me, 348, that shows no sign of ending and great sign of expansion. And we are sick and heartbroken because so many of us were brought up with such a deep commitment to the Jewish people, to Israel, as Zionists committed to liberal Zionism. And it's a tough moment because we are both committed to our people and to Judaism and Jewish life, and we care so deeply about justice, whether it's justice of protecting those innocents who were slaughtered on October 7th by Hamas, or the justice of securing the safety of Israel and all of its inhabitants, or the justice of doing so in a way that minimizes innocent life. We think about both of those things at both times. And it's a particular challenge for not only those of us here in the room, but our children and our grandchildren, who we raised with a commitment to Jewish life and learning, and who we are raising in our school to care about these things, about Judaism, about Israel and Zionism. We are the only liberal seminary to require the first year student body be in Israel, to understand what it means to cultivate Ahavat Yisrael, a love of the Jewish people in Israel. And yet we are seeing a new generation, our children, our grandchildren, maybe our nieces or nephews or friends, who are beginning to ask, wait a second, I am not with you anymore. I am not with you lock, stock, and barrel supporting Israel and Zionism. And Zionism has become a challenging word even to use outside certain circles. Much to my dismay, I will continue to identify that and call myself that. And in a moment, I'll explain why. I don't think it's a mystery, but the question that our children are asking and a new generation is asking, what is the relationship between our particularistic commitments, our particularism as Jews, as a Jewish people, as a Jewish community, and the universal values we are seeking: justice, human rights, democracy. That it should be even a question is for many of us sad, because as I hope to explain, the core idea of Zionism that we need to continue to hold on to is that of a liberation ideology, an ideology commitment to freedom and justice for the Jewish people, of the Jewish people, in order for the freedom and justice of all peoples. And those two things are not at odds with each other, but they're one and the same. So what does our tradition have to say about this? Well, we're about to say the prayer, Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon, at the end of the service. And it's a prayer that begins in a very specific, particularistic way, praising the fact that we are set apart from all other nations. And it ends, as the Reform movement has done, by expanding it to a sense of justice, Bayom Hahu. So it begins, let us now praise the greatness of the Creator who has set us apart from the other families of the earth, giving us a destiny unique among the nations, a statement of our particularism, of our distinctiveness that we're embracing. And it ends in a universalistic mode, Bayom Hahu, let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. And on that day, Adonai will be one, and God's name will be one. Some think the particular and the universal are opposed, but I think the particular is necessary to get to the universal. Our commitments to our own are what's required in order to achieve justice. How do you get then from Aleinu l'shabach to Bayom Hahu, from separation to universal? And I think the answer is within our liturgy and our tradition, by tying our own interests to those of others, and by the particularism expanding our field of empathy rather than seeing it as contracting. I'll explain that. Rabbi Green, you just mentioned I'm a political scientist, and this is, anyone know there's an election coming up? I promise not to talk about politics of today, but of a few decades ago. I want to read you the idea that we should embrace empathy, embrace how commitment to our own will advance the empathy and care of others, has been lost in our political discourse. I'm going to read to you just a small snippet from a political, from a primary debate between two political candidates over 40 years ago. One of them, and the question was, should the children of illegal immigrants have the rights to go to public school? And one of the candidates took this position, quote, "The immigrants and their children should get whatever society is giving to their neighbors. We are creating a whole society of really honorable, decent, family-loving people that are in violation of the law, and I don't want to see a whole group of 6- and 8-year-old kids being made to feel that they're living outside the law." And the candidate went on, "These are good people, strong people. A part of my family is Mexican." He's arguing that his family connection is what is inspiring him to connect to others. The other candidate, rather than shouting him down or calling him names, actually has a different point of view. He wants to go further. The United States, he says, hasn't been sensitive enough to our size and power. Mexico has a problem of 40 to 50% unemployment. The United States should care about Mexican unemployment for its own self-interest. Rather than talking about putting up a fence, this is really over 40 years ago, please don't, this is not about today. Why don't we work out some recognition of our mutual problems? The candidate urged his audience to understand that illegal immigration is the only safety valve right now that they have, cultivating empathy because we understand it's in our own self-interest. Now, as a side note, right, who were the candidates? Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. George H.W. Bush was the first, and the one who went even deeper in was Ronald Reagan. And so this is not a partisan issue. This is a changing debate of how we speak about it. But the point is that empathy is drawn from our particular. And we know this from the way that we speak about growing, taking care of our own self, taking care of our family, then growing from that to our community, to our humanity. Leviticus 19 says, "You shall not take vengeance and you shall not harbor a grudge against the members of your people." We're commanded to care about our people, and you shall love your fellow person as yourself. As I like to say, God may be able to love the whole world at once, but we need to start one person at a time, ourselves, and grow our sphere of empathy. Aristotle and Plato had a nice debate. I'm sure you remember it. Plato had proposed, let's all raise children collectively. Let's get rid of the family. And Aristotle basically said, are you crazy? Right? No one will take responsibility for them. It's because we have commitments to our own. And think about that. How many of you have children or grandchildren? How many of you had parents or grandparents? Okay, now everyone's hand. That was actually a test to see if you've fallen asleep. When we have children or grandchildren or for our parents, we felt their pain, we felt their joy, we felt their pride for them when they succeeded as if it was our own. Boundaries are an issue, but it's not just our children. Think about when Jews do great things in the world, when they win Academy Awards or in the Olympics, whether it's a Jewish person or the Israelis. We feel a sense of connectedness. We don't know these people. The mere identity of these people gives us a sense of satisfaction, of joy, and happiness. It's because we are connected as particulars to them. I have given this talk a number of times in the last year, and I use an example from this congregation that I know is painful, but it also works to share pain. July 4th, 2022, I first learned of the shooting that happened that affected so many of you in this congregation when I was up in the Berkshires. And I felt the pain of gun violence once again. And then I learned the name of Jackie Sondheim of blessed memory, your facilities director that was killed. and I learned that she was a member of a synagogue I had never been in. She was a member of a URJ synagogue, and a reform movement that I was part of, and suddenly the pain and the sadness, which doesn't compare to any of yours, but was amplified because of that connection. And it's not just that it feels the pain and the joy that's experienced because we feel connected as a particular, but it's also motivational. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the Jewish community raised tens of millions of dollars almost overnight. My grandparents came from outside of Odessa, and I felt connected. Now, it's kind of funny and ironic. They were kind of kicked out of Odessa, but that's the irony. We felt connected to Ukraine, so we're all of a sudden. But it motivates us. It isn't just that it makes us feel connected to one another. It motivates us to action. In 1984, there was an important book written by the political scientist Benedict Anderson named Imagined Communities. And he asked the question, if expanding your fields of empathy, how is it that nationalism got started? Nationalism is a new phenomenon. It's a phenomenon of the 19th century. And it got started thanks to the expansion of the printing press, that we could tell a story, that we could share stories, the newspaper, the book, the novel. The Jewish people tells a story every week, and then we read it again every year. It's called the Torah, and we have a shared story, and we tell that narrative together. But he said what makes nationalism distinct as a movement, as an idea, is not that it causes us to kill people that we don't know for a higher cause. It causes us to sacrifice ourselves in defense of others we have never met before. That is the idea, that it inspires in us a collective responsibility to sacrifice for others again whom we've never met. Now, there's a problem. Anderson was studying the rise of nationalism in Germany, right? And there's a big problem with nationalism. It goes bad very quickly. If what makes nationalism unusual is that it sacrifices for higher ideals. If those ideals are not particularly good, you got perverse nationalism. We have nationalism run amok right now in Russia, right? Putin, look what's happened, right? Why did Ukraine attack? Because of an expansive nationalism, a nationalism that went too far. But why is it that Zelensky has been able to counter and defend so strongly? Because that same sense of national pride has been able to mobilize people to say no in the face of an unjust enemy. Nationalism itself is neither good nor bad. It can be used for good or bad purposes. So the question is, how do we reduce the perniciousness of particularism that leads to racism and bigotry and xenophobia without losing the connectedness and the motivational empathy of nationalism itself? And this is ultimately going to lead to Israel and Zionism. I want you to go back to your parenting. I'll tell you about my kids and your kids. How many of you invested in your children more than in your neighbor's children who have them? I hope everybody. When you or I'll use myself, when I prioritize my kids' welfare by giving them lessons and taking them to violin practice, actually, they've never, I don't know why I said that, piano practice, they did piano and saxophone. I don't claim they're morally superior to your children. I mean, they're smarter and better looking, but they're not morally superior to your kids. My support for them is always limited by the values of justice that it's riding to. I'm investing in them because they will thrive because of it. But there are limits to this. The particularism that I'm investing in is for the sake of justice, and it's limited by principles of justice. If I were investing in my kids to be figure skaters and I took them to the skating rink with ice skating skates and all the things that you do in Chicago, I was a resident of Chicago for almost 10 years. I don't know why I said that, but you do that in Chicago more than in St. Louis, I'll tell you that. At any rate, that would be fine to invest in order to give them a competitive edge. But if I went and I kneecapped my opponent, you might remember Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan, that would be a step too far, right? It's not the failure of investing in my own, it's the failure of crossing a line of justice that it's there to provide. That is the problem. So the commitment to our own and our family promotes human flourishing. It expands our field of empathy, giving and sacrificing for others up to an entire people, but it's always for the purpose of justice and limited by the principles of justice. And the same goes for groups like the Jewish people. What are we doing right now? We are engaged in Jewish particularism in this service. We're promoting human flourishing, something that is critically important for justice and just societies. We're expanding our field of empathy by caring for those who you've never met simply because they are a Jew through the connection of Jewish identity, and always, always limited by principles of justice of what we will do to others in order to advance our own cause. It's what I call nationalism without kneecapping. Hebrew Union College invests in an idea of applied Jewish wisdom, that we are taking the wisdom of Jewish life, and we saw this principle that I've just explained in Judaism, and applies it to the world. Zionism, I want to say, is a particular kind of universalistic particularism that we have to remember because it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to say, oh, Zionism is that thing that just happened by the government or that action, and that's not Zionism. It was a liberation ideology to ensure the security and self-determination of the Jewish people, to ensure the flourishing of different kinds of Judaism and Jewish life, and always, always with the exercise of state power within the limits of justice, democracy, and human rights for all, built into its very charter of the State of Israel. Read the writings of Herzl, read the writings of the founders of Zionism. The state itself is built upon these principles: self-defense, flourishing, and the respect of human rights of democracy. Not one, not two, but all three. Now, it doesn't mean that the government always lives up to those ideals, any more than the American government lives up to our American ideals. And the fact that a government fails to doesn't mean that we give up on the principles of America any more than it means that the government of Israel might fail to live up to its principles. We give up on Israel or Zionism or those ideals. Zionism is universalistic particularism. It is nationalism without kneecapping. And if you can ask that question of the Jews, you could ask that of any nation. Apply it to the Palestinians. Right? Is their government or whoever their leadership is, are they doing what they have to defend the Palestinians? Are they doing what they have to flourish, for flourishing of their people? Are they doing it with respect for human rights and justice for others? Our present moment in Israel faces us with a deep conundrum. The barbarism of October 7th made clear that Hamas will treat the Jews as others, not as simply particularism for the sake of justice, but in the face of it. The devastation it wrought both inside of Israel and to the Palestinians in Gaza because of their own barbarity. And we have to always remember that what is happening is linked back to what happened on October 7th. And also it's true, while Israel has the right to self-defense, even the exercise of power has limits. Nachmanides, a middle-aged commentator, has said about the law of war that we must come to love our enemy. And we have more to do on that. It doesn't mean we stop fighting the enemy. It doesn't mean that justice requires giving that up or understanding right and wrong. But it does mean we have to have compassion. HUC is committed to the cultivation of a new generation of leadership that understands what it is to invest in our Judaism, Jewish people, Jewish community, in order to promote justice and pursue it. We have programs in Jerusalem, in Cincinnati, in Los Angeles, and New York. We're home in Israel to a beautiful campus. It's your home. As a URJ congregation, you are investing in us. And I hope that if you come to Israel, when you come to Israel, you will come and visit it. We also have a chance in the upcoming WZO elections to vote as a bloc, as a movement, as a reform movement, so that the values that we have for a liberal Zionism that promotes self-defense, flourishing, and within the limits of justice can be pursued within the state. So later at dinner, we'll take some other questions about what comes next, about how we talk about this, about how we can navigate this and the things that we can do. But until that point, we can remember, as the prayer that we're about to say, the Elenu, that Bayom Hahu, this idea that we end with, that universal justice will come about, begins with Aleinu l'shabecha don hakol, that we are separate from, and it's because we are separate that we are able to achieve justice, to expand our field of empathy, motivate us to act, but ultimately limited by the principles of justice. As we go forward, may we all view with compassion our children and grandchildren who are focused perhaps a little too much in some of our views on justice, a little too little on what our tradition and history is. And let us also not be so closed and be concerned only about our people and Israel that we don't remember the purpose of our commitments to both. Shabbat Shalom.